كان وكان على الله والتكلاء كان وكان على الله والتكلاء كان وكان على الله والتكلاء.
Carol Isaacs, welcome to Oslo, to Norway, to the Norwegian Jewpod, the Ak-Oi-Vei Jewpod.
Tusen takk.
You're welcome. Do you know why it's called Ak-Oi-Vei? Can you understand that?
Oi vei, I know a little bit of Yiddish, but what is the one before?
Well, in Norwegian we say Ak-Ove, which is kind of Oi-Vei.
Hey.
So I called it Ak-Oi-Vei.
Very good.
So the pre-word would be kind of Norwegian. So the reason why you are here is because actually yesterday you participated in the Jewish Cultural Festival in Trondheim. And today you visited the Jewish Museum in Oslo.
Yes.
Doing what?
Doing what? I brought my animation called The Wolf of Baghdad and showed it at both places, and then did a little Q&A and interview afterwards to explain the background, which was very well received. People were very kind. They came and they watched and they listened, and it was a very good experience. So thank you, Norway.
So you're actually calling it your animation. You don't say it's your film.
It's not quite an animation, it's not quite a film. The bit of background, I'm a cartoonist, I'm a musician. As a cartoonist, I did a graphic memoir, a book about my family, because we are from Iraq. We are Jewish, but we're from Iraq. And I called it The Wolf of Baghdad. And when I was doing it, I thought, I should make this into an animation. So I did it using my computer software, but it's not quite an animation. It's something called, I have found this out now, it's a new genre called a motion comic, which is a cross between traditional animation and print comic books. So on the screen you see the story unfold panel by panel, page by page, with a bit of animation in between. It's not CGI, it's not Disney, it's quite static, but you see the story unfold before your eyes, and because it's wordless, there's no dialogue.
You use music, you have pictures, and every picture is quite static, as you say, but there are actually some movements. There's an airplane, which is moving, and there's another thing. I don't remember right now what it was. There is another...
There's little subtle movements. It's like you're reading a comic book that's coming to life. It's something called a motion comic, which is apparently a new genre, which is a cross between traditional animation and print comic books.
Right.
So in essence, you're reading a comic book on the screen.
But you have actually published both a book and a film.
Correct, yes.
And what came first?
The book came first. I drew it as a cartoonist. I have a secret life. I'm a musician in real life, and then in my secret life, I'm a cartoonist called the Surreal McCoy, which is a very bad pun. I apologize.
Yeah, you really have to explain that to me. What does it? What is that? It's kind of
it's a pun.
Artist name, a pun.
A pun. In America, there's something when you say something is kosher, it's the real thing. You call it the real McCoy. It's something from way back involving whiskey barrels and somebody signing their name to prove that it's real whiskey and not fake, and he signed it McCoy or something.
Okay.
So when they say something is true, it's kosher, it's the real thing, it's the real McCoy. So I decided to call myself, in the spirit of bad punnery, the Surreal McCoy, which has stuck with me now forever.
But it's not a Jewish thing.
No, it's totally anonymous. I live in the social media under Surreal McCoy. People think I'm a man. How many emails have I had? Dear Mr. McCoy, we like your cartoon. I'm published in places like The New Yorker, who also thought I was a man until I showed up one day with my cartoons in my portfolio. And Private Eye and the Sunday Times. So I had this secret life when I'm not, even when I'm on the road as a musician, I would draw. I just had a passion for drawing, and people liked them, so I thought I'd try and publish. So I was drawing single panel funny cartoons for the last 20 years. And then recently I thought, why don't I do something more long form and something more to do with my family? Because in the world, people associate being Jewish with being European, with coming from Russia, Poland, speaking Yiddish, eating gefilte fish, and all of these things are not true of my family.
The Ashkenazi world.
Exactly, it's the Ashkenazi world, which is a world, but there's also the world of the Jew from the Arab land, from Middle East, North Africa, and from Iran, of whom there were very many, almost 1 million.
Right, the Mizrahim.
Mizrahim, which was up until recently a pejorative term in Israel. Mizrahi means Oriental in Hebrew, as we know, and people Mizrahim, they're peasants, they're Philistines.
Yeah, wasn't a very positive word.
No, not but it's being reclaimed. I'm happy to reclaim it. Although I'm happy to call myself a Babylonian Jew, because if you want to go back 2,600 years, that's what we were. We were from Babylon after we left Judea, after we left, we were taken out of the kingdom of Israel by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC.
A long time ago.
A long time ago.
So this is actually a very personal story for you, and it's also an ancient story.
Correct.
And I were there today and listened to you, and what was quite shocking to me was that prior to the Second World War, there were like 150,000 Jews in Iraq, or in Baghdad alone.
In Iraq, but in Baghdad, 30% of the population of Baghdad were Jewish.
Isn't that just incredible? And how many are there left today?
Three.
I mean, not 3,000, but three. 1, 2, 3.
3 individuals who are elderly, who do not want to leave, who after many pleading from Israeli government and other agencies want to stay there and live their lives quietly behind closed doors.
But are there no one else like living secretly? Nobody?
We don't know. Possibly. There may be people who are forced to convert.
Yeah.
It's possible. In Kurdistan, apparently there are people like that. There are some Jewish people living still quietly. But not enough research has been done, I don't think, on that.
That's so crazy. That you also, what you told me or told the audience was that 1 million Jews used to live in the Middle East as the Mizrahim, and today...
And North African as well, and Iranian, yeah.
Exactly, but those are Sephardic though, no?
No, Sephardic you see, for years I thought no one told me I was Mizrahi, obviously because it's a bad word. For years I thought I was Sephardi, but Sephardi means from the southern Mediterranean, Portugal, Greece, maybe Turkey.
Yeah.
The Jews from North Africa are North African. They're not.
But aren't quite a few of them also Sephardic?
Possibly originally, maybe they came. There was a lot of crossing the Mediterranean,
right.
But they have their own identity. The Jews of Morocco, Tunisia,
yeah.
Egypt, especially Algeria.
But the interesting thing, though, is that 1 million Jews in the Arabic region are now 4,000.
Yeah, something like this, some small amount. They were ethnically cleansed, for want of a better word. We didn't suffer like the European Jews in the Holocaust,
no.
A wiping out of people. It was more a slow erasure.
But you had what you call the Farhud. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So in Iraq, in the late 20s and through the 1930s, there was a unification of the Iraqi parliament with with Hitler and the Third Reich. Became very close. There was a chap called Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was a great favourite with Hitler, very good friends. He travelled a lot between Germany and Iraq, and he did a lot of propaganda in Arabic radio against the Jews. For example, Mein Kampf was published in Iraq, in the newspapers, translated into Arabic, very popular. So there was a steady drip of anti-Semitism throughout the 1930s that eventually culminated in harassment, in murders, in interrogations, in imprisonment, lots of strictures of what the Jews couldn't do anymore. Suddenly their lives were much more narrow in focus. And then in 1941 there was a military coup, and over 2 days there was no governance, nothing, and the mobs ran riot basically, and they were encouraged to kill Jews, slaughter Jews, ransack their homes and businesses. And for the Jews of Iraq, this was really the last straw. It was 2 days of hell. To this day, we don't know exactly how many died. The official number is a couple of hundred, but we think there were many more. They realized their time in Iraq was kind of coming to an end.
And this was 1941?
41, yeah, the Farhud. The word Farhud means, in Arabic, it means pogrom. So it was our Kristallnacht, as it were. But it had repercussions because throughout the 40s, there was a gradual realization, as I said, that there was no time to be, this was not a time to be Jewish in Iraq anymore, after all thousands of years of
But quite a few stayed until the 1970s.
There were pockets of time when a certain government or a certain prime minister would allow Jews to escape or to leave. In 50-51, they were allowed to leave provided they paid, I don't know how many dinar, and they left all their belongings. I mean, they couldn't take anything out with them, basically.
And when did your family leave then?
Between the late 40s and my grandmother was the last one to come out in 63. She managed to escape. But some stayed on till 71, when a lot of them escaped. They were either smuggled out across the Kurdish border into Iran or left in other ways. There was a big airlift in 1950-51 from Israel that airlifted tens of thousands of Jews straight to Israel. I think 100,000 went to Israel in 1 year. And you imagine, some of my family went and they lived in Ma'abarot, in these rough tent camps in the desert, until houses could be built for them, homes. So many spent many years living in terrible conditions.
But that kind of anti-Semitic behavior that you found in Baghdad in Iraq in 1941, did that resemble to anything that had happened in the region before? I mean, we all know about the Purim, which is, the Jewish celebration of the freeing of the Jews of the Babylon. But then we're talking about like some thousand years ago. So in between, what was the situation actually like in Iraq?
It was up and down for minorities. At some point they were in ascendance, the Jews, and then at some point they were wiped out by the Mongols. They came to great prominence. Iraq was the center, as we know, of religious and philosophical thinking in the medieval times, the Middle Ages. And then when the Ottoman Empire came, they had a certain status. Now, they call it dhimmi. It's an Arabic word, and essentially it's second-class citizenship. They were never equal to the Muslims. They had to do things. They could not ride a horse because then they would be above a Muslim. They could not build houses higher than the Muslims. So they had certain, but they lived well. They were free to practice their religion.
You said also they were part of the parliament or working in the government prior to the Second World War.
That's right. In 1917, when the British came and there was a British mandate, the British looked to the Iraqis to work with, and the most well-educated were the Jews of Iraq. They had access to great teachers and, for example, my father, who was born in the early part of the century, he was a whole generation older than my mother. He spoke 8 languages, and at 13, 14, he was running errands for the British because he spoke English. And the average Iraqi in the street could only probably speak Arabic. So my mother went to the Alliance Française school, which was a series of schools in Arab lands that the Jews went to. Her first language is Arabic, then came French, then Hebrew, and then English at the bottom.
And you actually said something about you speaking this Arabic, which is like kind of the Arabic Yiddish.
Yes,
so
I call it that because it's the closest. The older generation would be able to speak classical Arabic, the Muslim dialect, but also they would speak the Judeo-Baghdadi dialect, which is similar to Yiddish in that it uses the host, like Yiddish uses German with a lot of Hebrew. The Judeo-Baghdadi dialect would use Arabic with lots of Hebrew words, also Farsi, Persian, Hindi, and some Turkish as well. And when it was written in Hebrew characters like Yiddish. But when you read it, it sounded like Arabic. So this was a way the Jews could secretly communicate between each other because, of course, the average Iraqi wouldn't know how to read Hebrew. He wouldn't understand.
Right.
So it was another form of communication.
This diverse world of ours.
Yeah.
So, Wolves of Baghdad. Why wolves?
When I started the book...
because that's the name of the title of the book and the film.
Correct. I was doing some research and I found a book by one David Sassoon that he wrote in 1917 called The History of the Jews of Baghdad.
And the Sassoon is an Iraqi Jewish family, right? Because I learned about them when I visited Shanghai some years ago, because the Sassoon, they went to China like in the 15th century, 16th century or something. So,
and also Singapore and India. They kind of were very successful businessmen.
And is he the same
Merchants.
family?
I'm not sure. It's a big family, but he was an academic, and he wrote this book about. It's a wonderful snapshot of the community at that time, 1917. And there's a chapter on myths and superstitions, which is quite large because they were very, very superstitious. There's a bit about how the Jews would keep a wolf in their cellar because they believed it would keep away demons and jinns, evil spirits, that it would protect their children from illness and death, because a lot of children died young, obviously. And when my mother died, I found amongst her belongings a little amulet that is in the book. You can see it. It's a tooth that you would pin to the crib of a child. And it actually, I went to the Museum of Babylonian Heritage in Or Yehuda in Israel, and the curator confirmed that it is in fact a wolf's tooth. And underneath it is a little hamsa, a hand of Fatima. And this is exactly what they do. They pin it to the crib of the child, the cradle, and it would protect the child, apparently.
You know, in the Sami culture, they also have these small, like a ball of silver, you know, with small rings, which you also put to the crib in order to protect the child.
And the hamsa, which is the hand of Fatima that you see in any Middle Eastern home as well.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that in Jewish Arabic culture and Iraqi Jewish culture, the wolf is seen as a protector, whereas in the Western culture it's seen as an enemy, something evil, something bad.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But were there really wolves in Iraq?
Who knows? They were in the desert, because I met some Jordanian. I travelled there. I hiked in Jordan, and I met some Bedouin. And they told me that yes, there were wolves, and yes, they wear the wolf's tooth around their neck as well to protect them, because they admire the wolf. They think it's a wonderful, strong animal. It's their spirit animal. And the women folk take the fur and boil it and make medicine for their pregnant women to protect their children, the unborn child. So we think maybe the myth came from the Bedouin. It was brought into urban areas. Either way, it's a talisman for me in the book. It protects me as I travel to Baghdad through my family memories. And in the end, it realizes it cannot protect me any longer and brings me back to England to safety.
Because it's so beautifully done, what you've done in the film. You put yourself in the abaya, in the black dress, in the story as a present character, arrest me if I'm wrong, and then you picture the other people like in a transparent way, so you can actually see the houses and the streets through their bodies, because they're kind of ghosts.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your choices and why you decided to do it with that method.
I interviewed all my family for their memories, both good and bad, of life in Baghdad. And one of my aunts said, even if we could go back to Iraq, it would be as Jewish ghosts, because she realized that their life is finished now. There's nothing left for them. And I thought that's a great way to symbolize my family now. They're still there, but ghostly forms. They're kind of haunting the alleyways and the old houses in the Jewish quarter. So in the book, I see them, they don't see me, and I follow them through their daily routine. It's very domestic, the domestic life of what must have been a wonderful life at some point, because all your family, everybody lived close together, people got on, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody lived together quite happily on a very basic level of just neighborliness and looking after your neighbor. In fact, during the Farhud, one of my aunts remembered that her Muslim neighbors stood guard in their house. They said, "You will not come. These people are my friends, my family. Leave them alone." And I heard that repeated very often through my research. So I wander through the Baghdad that I imagine through their words. There's a great word in Finnish, kaukukaipu, which means, roughly translated, because it's one of those words that's hard to translate, it means roughly a nostalgia or a longing for a place to which you've never been.
Right, because you've never been to Baghdad.
Never. I only heard about it from my family.
So how do you actually picture and draw places you've never been to?
With a lot of help from the internet.
Modern technology.
Technology is wonderful. That things, while I was making the project, I kept a blog, and I found, when I'm looking at the statistics, that I had visitors from Iraq, from Baghdad. You could actually pinpoint where they were coming from, their IP address. And they followed me on Facebook and they asked me questions. They were young Muslim students, about 18 or 19. They wanted to know who I was, what am I doing? And we got into conversation. I said, would you mind taking some pictures of the old Jewish quarter? I want to see what it looks like now. And they sent me these pictures, and it's all run down. Everything is crumbling, falling down. It's such a shame. They're beautiful architecture of Jewish homes, very special.
So the Iraqi Baghdadi people haven't moved into the Jewish houses?
Some have took over because of course they left.
Yeah.
But a lot in the poor part of the city where the Jewish quarter was, they're still quite ramshackle and quite kind of dilapidated and falling down.
Because I actually saw a documentary about the Jewish quarter, and it looked just, empty and falling apart.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, though, that if it was like in the center of a big capital in the world today, somebody would,
You'd think. In fact,
gentrification.
The terrible thing happened. Has Ezekiel Sassoon, one of the, he was a finance minister in the government about 80, 90 years ago. They just tore down his house to build a shopping mall or something ridiculous. They don't care, the government, they just want to build, and they don't know what kind of gems they have in their hands. If they could restore these homes and make peace, the tourist industry would be hugely profitable, because I would go in a heartbeat. I know so many others who would go. I mean, we're talking Iraq, all the cradle of civilization. How many people would go, just history buffs would go, to see the old houses, to see the shrines, to see the places where, where Abraham was born, or,
But is there actually any tourism going to Iraq?
No, it's a mess. Iraq has suffered terribly after the war, the Gulf Wars, the two wars. They just didn't seem to catch a break, and now there's more fighting. Shia, Sunni, Iran, it's terrible what's going on.
So people don't go to Baghdad to visit?
I heard some people have gone secretly, some Jews. A friend of my mother's actually went and bought a house in Erbil, in Iraqi Kurdistan, just to make a statement that he wants his children to be able to visit one day.
So what about your family's houses and values? Did you leave everything behind?
Yeah,
Can you
everything.
claim the right to gain it?
There is a movement to try and claim, but the state that Iraq is in right now, it's not like Germany, where they were able to make reparations to people. It won't be for a long, long time, I don't think. The infrastructure is just not there. They're suffering so much from the fallout of the wars and the terrible tribal fighting they have right now. It's not possible.
Actually, in the film you mentioned something which made me very curious, and I don't know if you know anything more than you said in the film, but you said you had like this grand aunt, or the old aunt, that was kidnapped once by a sheikh, and nobody really knew what happened to her. And that's so. What is this? It's a myth. How could that happen?
It's true that we have one family tree on my father's side that dates back to the mid-1800s. This is as far back as we can go, because nobody kept records. Nobody even had a surname. My father was the son of his father's name, Yitzhak bin Dawood.
Yeah.
Isaac
Ben means
son
the son.
Yeah. So on the family tree, the very first line, there's like about 5 siblings, and there's da-da-da-da-da, and then Sulha, which was her Arabic name, Sally, abducted by sheikhs.
That's what it says.
That's what it says. And when I asked my dad, he said that was his great aunt. He said, oh yes, apparently they had a yeshiva. They were a very religious family. They had a yeshiva near Ezra's tomb in the south. It was a place of great pilgrimage for the Jews. They used to travel from Baghdad forever before the high holy days, especially before Pesach, and travel to make a pilgrimage to the shrine. They had a yeshiva, and apparently one day when she was out and about, she couldn't have been, she was just a young girl. She was kidnapped by a bunch of sheikhs and never seen again.
That's terrible.
Terrible, but apparently this happened a lot. And
she was pretty maybe then, or...
Probably, or young, and they took her to God knows where. The family was so traumatized by this experience, I found out later that they left Iraq and they took the trail that other merchants had taken to India, and they ended up in Burma in 1880, where they set up a business in the King Thibaw, King of Burma, the last King of Burma, in his palace in Mandalay, where they set up a trading post, and they made a life for themselves in Burma. And that's why my father lived 15 years in Burma working in the family business.
Really?
So we have this whole side. That's my next book,
Yeah.
The Jews of Burma, yeah.
Oh,
It's,
that's so exciting.
Yeah.
So in the film, of course, you use a lot of wonderful music. You are a musician and then you're a cartoonist, or both, or sometimes
Both. Sometimes both at the same time. I've been a musician since I was 4. I had piano lessons, and I left school. I played in bands.
you
pop
play the
bands.
accordion, is it?
No, keyboard. Well,
Keyboard.
At the time, this was in the kind of 1980s, after punk had happened. There was like a whole thing about everyone can play, and I ended up playing in bands, and I never went to university, my poor parents. So I kind of enrolled in the University of Life, and I became what we call a freelance musician. I played with many different people.
Right.
Sinéad O'Connor is one.
Right,
Indigo
wow.
Girls.
She just passed away.
I know, very, very sad.
Yeah.
I was with her for quite a few years, and a band called Indigo Girls, who are American folk.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of traveling with them. And while I'm traveling, there's a lot of sitting on the bus going to and across America for hundreds of miles, thousands. And I'm bored, and I'm start doodling, and I created a cartoon career for myself. And
But you
got
have a
published.
wonderful line in your cartoons. I really, really like them.
Thank you.
So there is this famous Jewish songwriter from Iraq, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Saleh al-Kuwaiti and his brother Daoud were two brothers. They were very important Jewish composers in the 1930s. They were both in the Iraqi National Radio Orchestra, who were comprised of mostly, there was one non-Jewish musician, the percussionist. And the story goes that one of the prime ministers turned on, because they broadcast every night. Everybody listened to them. They were hugely popular. These two brothers wrote 70% of all the popular Arab classical songs of the day. So everybody knew their songs. Even today, people do. And the story goes that one day the prime minister turned on the radio and he said, "What? There's no music? What happened to the orchestra?" And someone said, "It's Yom Kippur. They're not playing."
They have a holy day today.
Yes. And because it's haram, forbidden in Islam to play music unless you're praying, like you have a muezzin chanting the songs and singing. They didn't have a tradition of instrumental or songwriting. So the Jews became the default songwriters of that time and wrote so many classical songs, as I say, still popular to this day. Unfortunately, Saddam Hussein erased their names from the history books because he didn't want it to be known that Jews wrote
Right.
great songs and called
what
it
you
traditional.
And also you said something that most Arabic people today don't know, that many of those very, very famous Arabic songs are actually made by Jews.
I think thanks to the Arab Spring of a few years ago, and the more people are able to get online, the internet is more democratic. As people, they begin to, they're asking questions, they're seeing, oh, who are these people, the Jews that lived with us, who lived here before us, and responsible for publishing. The first publishing house was by a Jew, for so much culture, our heritage. So they're asking questions, and I think the zeitgeist is now in Iraq that they're looking to see in their history, who were these people? What happened to them? Why aren't they here anymore?
You told this very touching story about when you had a screening of your film in London and the Iraqi ambassador came.
Representatives from the embassy came. We had 2 nights. It was the performance of the book, which is like a silent movie where you see the images on screen, but the live musicians play along, of which I'm part. I play Arabic accordion. And we did it over 2 nights. One night for the Israeli embassy and the second night for the Iraqi embassy.
You couldn't have them together?
That was too much. I'm too much of it. I was hoping, but it was amazing that because it was at a Jewish art centre that this took place in London.
Okay.
Which was really important because for anyone Arab walking in there is like a big statement.
So the Iraqi ambassador did actually accept the invitation to that Jewish institution
Plenary,
then?
yes, the representative came, and he sat in the front row with a couple of his colleagues. They were singing along. They knew the music. They saw the visuals, and they were visibly moved. And having said, "No, I don't want to talk. I don't want to say anything," when we did the Q&A afterwards, he grabbed the mic from my hands and said, "This is wonderful. We need to see it in Iraq. I want to invite you. I will make you a visa. Please come." So I'm going to hope to take him up on his offer at some point when it's safe to go.
Right, because it's not now?
No, not now. It's not a good time.
Not for anyone or not for you?
Not for Westerners. Never mind being a Jew. I think if I went as a British person, my British passport would be good to have, but you are kind of a sitting target. I was warned that there are a lot of gangs, criminal gangs, that want to kidnap to raise money, hold people hostage. They just want money. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, whatever. The fact that you're a Western European, i.e. wealthy, they will do that. So not the time.
Sounds scary.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm a filmmaker myself, so I'm a little bit more curious about the film and how you make the film. And what is really interesting, I think, is because it's like you have the screen is almost, like when you're on Instagram, it's like it's vertical.
Yeah.
And it's like a white sheet almost. And then each picture pops up and it becomes like a comic.
A page.
A page.
Yeah.
And sometimes you tone it in and you fade it in and out. And it's there's not a lot of colors. You keep it into the grayish, a little bit blue.
The color scheme is it starts off in black and white. It goes into like a darker blue twilight when I go to Baghdad, and then it bursts into this vibrant color when I'm walking around the markets and seeing life. And then it gradually gets darker as the story goes, and then it comes back into black and white when I come back to the UK, to England.
And why does the you character, the I character in the film, have to have the abaya?
Because it's a way of blending in, as my matriarchal, all my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, all the women folk did. This is what they did. They did. They wore. My grandmother, God bless her, brought the abaya when she came from Baghdad. She brought one suitcase and she had her abaya with her. I think we donated it to the museum in Israel. It was a statement. She thought she'd need it in London.
So the modern period in Iraq, when the women did not wear the abaya, the black thing where it's not like you only show the eyes, you show the face. Yeah. I mean, for how long was that? Like after Second World War until the 1970s or something?
Yeah, the 60s and 70s. You see wonderful pictures all over the Arab world, in Iran as well.
Yeah.
Women walking in sleeveless dresses, not minis, but like looking Western,
right?
With the with the hair showing, and it could be a fashion scene in Paris. Some of the scenes in Baghdad,
but it didn't last for long.
No, the religious authorities came down, and it's a cultural thing and now women. I think you have to wear hijab, right. Although I think it's a bit more relaxed in Baghdad now. But as we know with ISIS, it was not relaxed in Mosul, in the north, and other places.
No. So, Carol, what do you feel then? Iraqi, English, Middle Eastern, Mizrahim, European?
It's a good question. You know what? I thought by doing this I'd get some closure. Spoiler alert, no closure.
No. You're just gone investigating further.
Yeah.
Soon you're going to be even belonging to other Asian countries.
My father apparently became Burmese when he was living in Burma.
Right.
So who knows?
Exactly.
I know that my roots are very shallow in the UK because I'm the first generation to be born there. I'm grateful, so grateful to have a British passport. But I realised also I could actually vote in Iraqi elections because my father had an Iraqi passport. So if I wanted to have another passport, it would be easy. I could theoretically get an Iraqi one, not that it would do me much good. But like most Jews, I'm kind of not stateless, but nomadic.
I was actually curious, when you have like an Arabic Jewish background and you are dealing with the themes like, a lost homeland, how does that connect to the Palestinians and their situation today? Because they would also claim, that they have a lost homeland.
True, but with this story, all I wanted to do was put a testimony out there of my family. And to be honest, I haven't had that discussion with people. It's been more taken as presented that it's just one family story that kind of gives a bigger picture of what the community went through. And it sheds more light on what's going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that more than 50% of the population of Israel now is from Mizrahi heritage. That
Jews
we are
from
indigenous. We're indigenous to that land. It's not like we're the colonial European, and the Jews from Russia, and they can probably trace themselves back to that as well. We're not interlopers in any way. A lot of the Jews of Iraq would have said they weren't Zionists. I mean, they believed in Israel as a homeland, but they were mostly, this is their home. They'd lived longer probably in Iraq than they had anywhere else. This was their home. The term Arab Jew has been politicized. That's a whole other podcast. I would say I'm not an Arab Jew. I'm an Iraqi Jew. I'm a Babylonian Jew. I like that because it gives the
and
kind
what is
of
the
length.
difference, the Arab Jew and the Babylonian Jew?
Babylonian Jew goes back a couple of thousand years. Arab Jew, you wouldn't say Arab Muslim, you wouldn't say Arab Christian. People are very proud of their country. They would say, I'm an Egyptian Jew, I'm an Egyptian Muslim, an Iraqi Muslim, I'm from Lebanon, I'm from Syria. Arab is not, and what about the Iranian, the Persian in Iran? They're not Arabs, they're Persians. And the North Africans, they're not Arab, they're not, the Egyptians are very proud to be Egyptians, they're not Arabs, North Africans.
So we did talk about, the Mizrahim, the Sephardim, the Ashkenazim, and then you also have this term called the Ashkenazi norm, which I have never heard before, and I thought it was so interesting. And I think I know exactly what you mean, but I would like you to tell me what do you mean when you use that
Okay,
term?
so the actual phrase, and I believe it come from an academic background because it's certainly not my vocabulary, Ashkenormative. And apparently what people like me and other Mizrahi Jews are doing is challenging the Ashkenormative.
Ashkenormative, that's it.
So Ashkenormative means what is taken for being Jewish in the world. What is people assume, and I've had this all my life, that because I'm Jewish, my family comes from Russia, from Poland, from Germany, from Czechoslovakia, and that I speak Yiddish at home, that we eat bagels and smoked salmon, that we eat the fish thing?
Gefilte fish.
Gefilte fish, which is great. People do that, but not my culture. We eat rice. We speak Judeo-Arabic. We eat chili. We don't have potatoes. It's a completely different thing. So, and people didn't believe me, and they're like, what? The school I went to, a very posh British school, public school, 1,000 students, 30 of whom were Jewish. I was the only non-European Jew. So I'm a minority within a minority already. Even the Ashkenazim don't really know much about our story.
But did you feel that? I mean, did people look down on you or anything? Yeah, because you were not Ashkenazi.
Yeah, I look different. I have curly hair. My skin is slightly browner. I say, you look like an Arab. You can't be Jewish, that kind of attitude. And
this is a big issue, though, in Israel. The conflict, especially because the whole country was built by the Ashkenazi Jews.
Yes.
And that's been an issue since the beginning, actually.
Since the beginning, exactly. And the Jews from Arab lands, the ones who landed in Israel, they suffered terrible discrimination because they didn't look like the Europeans. They were not the ideal Jew. The Europeans thought they looked down on them because they spoke the language of the enemy. They spoke Arabic. Their culture was of Arab lands and Iran and North Africa. So they were automatically treated as second-class citizens.
Right.
It still pervades to this day, but there's a great thing. We talked about the Jewish composer of the 1930s. His grandson is a chap called Dudu Tassa, who's in his 40s. He lives in Israel. He's a big rock star. I mean, he's huge. In the last 10, 15 years, he's been rediscovering his grandfather's music. And he has done this wonderful record of updating with a rock feel with guitars and drums, and it's hugely popular. Suddenly, Mizrahi music is cool. Who knew? So there's like a resurgence of, it's not looked down upon anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is kind of cool. Yeah. Who are these people,
That is cool, though.
Yeah, and music is always the way to grab people.
Yeah. What are your new projects? You said something, you're going to do something with your father's history and the family. So is that going to be a book?
Yes, also
too?
a graphic memoir.
Yeah.
I only found out recently that one of my father's cousins, the Burmese side, because they considered themselves Burmese. They still were religious. They had a synagogue in Mandalay and one in Rangoon as well.
Is it politically okay to say Burma?
Yes, I tell you why.
Shouldn't it be Myanmar or something?
You would think, but the military forced the term Myanmar upon the Burmese people at one point. They didn't ask, they just forced it upon them. And a lot of people objected to that. even though Myanmar is like a Burmese term. So it was something that was forced upon them by a government they didn't ask for. So you can say both.
Okay.
But in this context, I say Burma because it was Burma when my father was there,
Right.
in the 1930s. And he went as a young boy because, as I say, the family had a thriving ice factory. They made soda water and ice for the British Army and the British people living out there, and also anyone who wanted it. And
Not ice cream, but ice.
Ice, no ice, because it was
Like ice in the gin and
yeah,
tonic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because everybody drank gin and tonic out there, right?
Yeah.
And they lived there very happily for 150 years or so. And I found out recently one of my father's cousins was an accordion player. He had an accordion. There's a picture of him. And the story goes that when the Japanese invaded in 1942, many tens of thousands, 100,000 people were made refugees. They fled. Because the Burmese Jews were working with the British, they were considered the enemy. So they all left their belongings.
Not because they were Jewish, though, or
Possibly,
that too.
But they were more worried because they were seen as working with the enemy.
With the Allies. Yeah.
So they left, and the family left their wonderful home, their palatial surroundings, their factory, and this one man, Maurice Saul, God bless him, my hero, he took his accordion, which weighed about 11, 12 kilograms, that's all he took, a change of clothes, and walked to India across the jungles and the mountains. And I thought, what a great story, I want to do that. So before lockdown, my partner and I, who's a photographer, we went and we had he'd done a short story about his life. He'd given it to his daughter, who gave it to me. So I knew how to plot the trajectory of his journey from Mandalay to the border. And we followed his footsteps. I took my accordion, I carried it on my back like he carried it. We went through all the little villages he went through. We went on the boat, we went on the bus. We saw an ox cart he took, even though we didn't ride it. And I made a journal of our travels in parallel with his travel.
Wow.
And it's a snapshot of 1940s Burma with modern day Burma, Myanmar. And I cannot tell you how kind the people were. They must have thought I was an alien. I was walking around temples, these beautiful places with my accordion on my back. I walked into villages. I sat in a market. I played for them. I played them some klezmer. I played them some Irish folk tunes. I played them even an Iraqi tune.
Wow.
And had the most amazing reception. And my partner documented this all. And it's like a travel journal, a travelogue about Myanmar now and Myanmar then, as seen through my eyes and my cousin's eyes.
So when will we be able to see this?
As soon as a publisher accepts it for publishing, I'm sending it out to people. I hope that there will be interest.
But will it be a film too?
Probably not. I made a short 3-minute film with some music of the pictures and some of the drawings, just to give a flavour.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
You said also something about that you learn people how to read graphic novels.
Yes.
So is that something you need to learn?
It's interesting. My book, The Wolf of Baghdad, has now been put on the curriculum of the largest Jewish high school in Canada, in Toronto, for 16, 17-year-olds. And a Jewish comic scholar came to me with the idea that we should make an educator's guide for teachers who want to teach graphic novels as a tool for history or for Jewish studies. And because they don't know this story so well, we also put into the teacher's guide a bit about the background of the Jews of Iraq as well, so they can teach history if they want to teach it as a history curriculum or as a Jewish studies. So it's a free resource available on my publisher's website. Anyone can download it for free. Book clubs, if you want to, because some children are more adept at reading. They know how to read comics, right? Teachers maybe don't know. And this is the exercises in how to pass the meaning of why does this panel look different to the others? How do we tell the story? And there's exercises in how you can.
But isn't our generation actually the cartoon generation? I mean, I was thinking that the teachers probably even would know it more than the pupils.
Some don't. They don't know how to. It's more about delving deeper into the meaning, how to read a graphic novel, how to take more out of it, because the panels are not drawn any old how. There's like a method to why they are square in some places, round or jagged in others, and why the colors differentiate, because there is no text, so it has to show the mood and the storyline.
People who listen to us now, where can they see your film, Wolves of Baghdad?
On my website, there is a shop where you can download or live stream you can rent.
Yeah.
You can buy the DVD, the CD.
I'll put the link in the information to the pod.
Thank you. I believe there's a bookstore in Oslo, Tronsmo. Tronsmo.
Yeah.
That is carrying my book, and so
great.
please go. It's great because it's an independent bookstore, and we must support those places rather than
definitely. We're making commercial here now.
Yeah.
Gå til Tronsmo og spør etter boken til Carol Isaacs, Wolves of Baghdad.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina, for this. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you too, Carol. Takk for at du lytter til AKV Jødepodden. Om du liker denne podcasten, kan du trykke abonner i din foretrukne spiller. Da vil du motta beskjed om når neste episode blir publisert. Dersom du har spørsmål til AKV Jødepodden eller vil bidra med innspill og ideer, send gjerne en mail til post@jodepodden.no. AKV Jødepodden er støttet av stiftelsen Fritt Ord. Melodien du hører er Carol Isaacs Mukadima Hiyas.